Well, howdy everybody, it's Chris again with another lens review, this time for something a bit cheaper and less exotic. It is the Canon 55 to 250mm telephoto lens. As you can see, it's for a telephoto lens, it's actually quite small compared to the 70 to 300mm lenses you can buy nowadays, including the cheaper Tamron one. This is actually rather small. It extends quite a bit on focusing. Makes a bit of noise too, maybe you can hear that, my microphone's down here. And that's using manual focus, it's actually quite noisy. And it extends quite a bit on zooming. But in overall dimensions, it's actually much smaller than most telephoto zoom lenses. It's image stabilized, and the image stabilization, well, we'll look at that later, I've got a few things to say about it. But overall, it's a very cheap lens, it's used as a kit lens pretty much, so I pretty much passed it by whenever I was looking for a telephoto lens. I don't actually have a telephoto lens at the moment. I decided that most of my film work that I do is wide angle or medium angle, so I use my fast standard zoom lens. So just for a long time I haven't had a telephoto lens. I actually got rid of my super zoom lens because the telephoto performance wasn't very good. The pictures were kind of soft and full of chromatic aberration, so I actually sold that to my friend. It's a good lens, but yeah, apart from that I wasn't too happy. But I borrowed this from a friend. I'd read lots of bad reviews about this particular lens on the internet, that it's a bit soft, there's poor chromatic aberration, there's low contrast in the pictures, it handles poorly. But I actually tried my friend's copy of this, and it turned out to be much better than I expected. The pictures are sharper, and, well, why don't we take a look? Here you can see the zoom range of the lens from 55mm f4 to 250mm f5.6. It's not a constant lens. The aperture darkens as you zoom in, which causes those jumps in brightness. It's inconvenient for filmmaking, but considering how cheap the lens is, it's not the end of the world. Also note that the image contrast suffers a little as you zoom in. I was really surprised by how sharp this lens is. It's not up to professional standards, but it's not far away either. It's certainly miles better than any super zoom lens at the same focal length. Here are some pictures at full zoom. Here's a 100% crop at f8. If you're like me and you're not particularly into telephoto photography, but you want something better than a super zoom lens, then this is perfect. I'm not really seeing any significant chromatic aberration in the corners. The image quality is very pleasing indeed, even on an 18 megapixel camera. The lens's bokeh is generally nice, but a tiny bit nervous sometimes. Here's a quick demonstration of the picture quality. Here's a picture I took of the moon using my Tamron super zoom lens at 270mm. It was focused correctly and at the optimum aperture. Now check out the Canon lens at 250mm. There's way more detail. With the Canon lens, having a shorter zoom range means much higher picture quality. This shot demonstrates the lens' good macro capabilities. When fully zoomed in, you can get really close to your subject. Disastrously though, when you zoom back out, the minimum focus distance remains the same. So at 55mm, you can only get this close. Quite a strange lens characteristic. Here's some footage demonstrating the image stabilization in action. It's a little nervous and not as steady as the equivalent and more expensive lenses. I'm slightly disappointed by the IS on this lens. You can also hear the gentle clicking sound it makes. You should use an external microphone to record sound if you're using IS on this lens. As you can see, the lens has a cheap plastic mount. The controls are smooth enough and manual focus works fine. Basically, I think it's just right for its price point, which is really cheap. Basically, this lens has been absolutely perfect for me. Because I don't use telephoto very much, all I want is a cheap telephoto lens. I don't want to spend loads of money on a lens I'm not going to use much, so this is absolutely perfect for me. It's nice and cheap, and the price, the performance is actually really good. It's nice and sharp, there's very little chromatic aberration. It just works really nicely. For filmmaking, it's going to be perfect for me. Like, I could spend more money on something more expensive, something that's a bit faster with a wider aperture, but I don't need to do that because I don't really use this focal length very much. So, I'm going to say I recommend this lens to anyone who isn't crazy serious about their telephoto filmmaking or photography.